Man, because we teach these principles in the business side, right? We say like, bring value, listen to people, and the end result, maybe the business will succeed. But I'm like, from a life perspective, you can infuse your life with meaning and joy and happiness right now with the same principle, you know? Take interest, listen, look at somebody. We've got a good one today. Welcome everybody to the Business of Luxury Weddings podcast. I'm happy to say my good friend Joshua Coombes joins us today here on the podcast. Joshua, welcome, man.
Thank you, Otto. Yeah, thanks, James. Thanks, both of you. It's been so nice to, I've been really looking forward to coming on and having this conversation.
Yeah, man. Awesome. Yeah. You have an incredible story, right? So I'm curious. You want to just launch in and tell us a little bit about you, and then we can get into more of it.
Of course. Yeah. It is quite unique in its own way. Sometimes I don't really, like a lot of us, have that much time to stop and really reflect on like these chapters of your life. But certainly the last 8 years, nearly 9 years now, has been very interesting for me. So yeah. I'm calling in from Mexico now, where I live. But for most of my late 20s into my mid 30s, I was living in London. That's where I'm from. I'm from the UK, a town a few hours away from London. And my life changed a lot about 8 years ago. I was walking around the city that I was living in, I think seeing something that we all do on a regular basis, whether that be in, North America or Europe or many cities around the world, which was homelessness and walking by men and women who were living on the street. And this was always something I was compassionate about. I always figured it was probably, not as linear as just people making bad choices or some of the things that these layers that you see on the outside, like people suffering with substance misuse and addiction and all of those kinds of things. But I didn't really have this way to connect with this personally. In fact, I really felt super overwhelmed by the whole thing. Sometimes I was literally walking over people on my, like the train station, as I was on the way to work. So I was working in a salon as a hairdresser at the time. And I'd never really thought about using this skill. But I was making money. It was my career, the way that I was paying rent, and taking that outside to be of service in some way. And that changed one day when I met someone who was sleeping on the street at the time. I had my things with me. I was waiting to actually go to a client's hair to cut their hair outside of work to make a bit of extra pocket money. Because I was living in a shared house in London at the time. I wasn't earning a great deal of money. So I'd go and do these home visits each week. And that would be a way of putting a few quid in my back pocket to go to the pub at the weekend or whatever else. And actually, I didn't end up making it to this appointment because I saw this guy and I had about 5-6 minutes to wait for my bus, and we sparked up a conversation. And in that moment, I just remembered I had my scissors, my clippers, everything I needed to cut somebody's hair. So I offered him a haircut. And in probably the couple hours I spent with this guy, obviously it was a bit different, cutting hair on the street, right on the curb, with a busy city all around you than it was in the comfort of a salon with everything like that. But it was amazing, honestly. It really just. It was just the thing that was most apparent to me, even though it was quite a nice feeling handing him the mirror at the end. And I saw this guy whose charisma really emerged, somebody who was looking down at the floor, somebody who clearly hadn't had their haircut for a while. But it was really the conversation. It was showing up and listening for a minute. I felt very different on the bus home as well, choosing rather than going out to make an extra 100 quid, going out to do something for free for somebody, for a stranger. There was a lot that happened there for me as well.
Wow. And so then, this become a whole thing now. You have a foundation and like you've gone on doing this. What happened then? What's the flow?
Yeah. So the next part of that was starting to go out and do this more and more. And at the beginning, it wasn't something I really thought, I'm going to completely change the trajectory of my life with this first interaction with somebody. But that's how it went. I went out the next day off I was a bit more prepared. This time I took some things that would be useful out there, like some dry shampoo, because obviously you can't wash somebody's hair out on the street. And, just some extra things to give that person too as well, hand sanitizer and that kind of stuff, the essentials you might need in that situation. And I started to just go out like each week and do this on evenings or weekends when I had a day off. And, after 3 to 6 months, it began to grow. And actually the reason, after a few months, I realized these stories I was hearing were just really powerful. People who I was meeting through all, had been through so many different things from all walks of life. It wasn't just how homelessness sometimes looks from the outside. I think I had to really question the imagery there for me as well. I don't know about you guys, but, I used to think of homelessness and think about this man with this old man with a grey beard sat with a bottle in a shop doorway somewhere. And it was people I was meeting who were like, I met a guy, I remember, who was 19. And then the next day I met this guy who was 65. And there was people, men and women, and everyone had a story, and sharing those became something that I started to do on Instagram. So at the time, it wasn't, photo sharing was still really big then. The algorithm actually really pushed kind of photos and why it was created originally. And I just decided, with consent from the people that I was meeting, with permission, because obviously it's a sensitive subject, to share people's stories. And I did that through taking a before photo before I'd cut the hair, and then one afterwards, and writing a bit of that person's story. And then I wanted to come up with something where people could get involved in this. And I'd finish each post with "Do something for nothing," which was like a hashtag I'd use. Which, social media can be all kinds of things. And for me, it was just a way of saying, maybe people can relate to this in some way and want to get involved in their community. Maybe people already know somebody who's doing something cool, and just creating a small space in social media to be able to have some positive actions. And within that first, I think, even 3 to 6 months of starting to post on Instagram, it started to slowly get shared more and more, and people started to message me, how can I get involved? And then the press picked it up. Actually, BBC came and filmed something on the streets with me in London. And that really kind of made this explode, and stratospherically it kind of went viral for a bit because the millions of people sort of saw it, and that really took it to like another level.
Yeah. Interesting. Can I go back to that first interaction? I just did, I mentioned earlier, I have 3 boys. I just did career day at one of their schools talking about photography. And I was really talking about more career with these kids, right? I spent the first 15 minutes about just talking about life in general and where your career might go and how it might change. One of the things I was talking to them about is opportunity is going to come up in your life. Grab it. Say yes to opportunity. And I just wanted to go back to this very first interaction that you had. What was it that made you go, I think I should give this guy a haircut? Was there something in the conversation? Like, was there something in the conversation that led to that? Or was it just this feeling that you had, like, this guy needs to be touched or needs to be, because I think a lot about the touch aspect of what you're doing. Both on a worrisome level, but then also like how important that is to this individual.
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I think, what you said, it's a big part of it. I think life, sometimes there's moments in your life and these opportunities can come in all different forms, and that might be something like your career that could take you to a different place. But for me, this was like, something that I was really yearning for when I look back at the time. I was fulfilled in my life in a lot of ways on the surface, To be really honest, I wasn't somebody who, like, actually, to some people's standards, like I was making enough, I was making enough to pay rent. I was making enough to see my friends at the weekend, to go away for a week or two each year. I didn't have a great deal of disposable income, but I was good with that. My roots are playing in a punk band. I've always followed, like, before I was cutting hair, I was playing music when I was younger. So I've always been connected to, like, doing things that I enjoy and living life with experience. But still, I was living in London, and I was like, all right, okay, I have a great group of friends, and I enjoy going into work each day. But was I really interacting with, like, my broader community beyond just, like, that social network we have? It starts obviously at home with your nuclear family, if you have family and children, of course it does, and then your friend circle. But what community meant for me living in a big city, I didn't really feel tapped into that, and especially being of service, and this is not something, I think everybody's background is different, everybody's motives are different, but I think wherever you come at, I think it's a really important part of all of our lives, and being of service, not to tap myself on the back and say, oh wow, I'm a really good person, I've clocked off my few hours for the week doing something good. It was about accessing a place within myself that I think was dormant at the time, and it became activated. And to go back to that first moment, there was something I remember that for some reason that day I didn't let the internal dialogue get in the way that usually might kick in that moment, which is really, I don't know what happened. I got to be honest with you. It was just seizing that opportunity, like you said, because it would have been so easy for me to double back on myself in my mind and say, oh, like, really, is this like really top priority for this guy right now? Hasn't got anywhere to sleep tonight. There's 1,000 things he could be thinking of before he was thinking about getting a fresh trim.
It's going to give you a haircut.
So, as soon as
with me.
Right, exactly. And as soon as I went there if I went there in my head, I could have gone, just get your bus. What are you talking about? Or the biggest one maybe would be the fear of rejection too, as well. You lend put out a hand to somebody and say, hey, can I help you in some way? And it's a normal thing to think, how's that person going to feel about that? How is it going to be received? Thankfully, for some reason that day, it was just pretty direct. And I think, what that was is, I see that now more clearly, which is, when you operate from your heart and, that chakra and that channel is open, I think that, sometimes you can dial into that feeling you have and not get stuck in the mind, because obviously it's really important to use the mind for so many reasons. And in this situation, you do still have to keep, like any situation in life, your instincts and your wits about you and not put yourself in harm's way. But it was like what my heart felt like doing in that moment. And there wasn't that block of should I, shouldn't I, is this going to be a good idea or not?
Yeah. I'm very curious, Joshua, about people's responses to it. I know you published a book and everybody should buy it. They can read those stories there, right? But what was the response from this first guy, for example? What was his experience of my haircut or this? I don't know. What was the response?
Well, as you tapped into, I was about to. That's where I went then. Actually, just thinking about how interesting it was, that first experience too, because a few things happened, which was also, you live in a big city. People listening to this, it can be so easy. We're all following our mouse trails, getting on with our day, and we are busy. I know obviously, people there's different levels of that. Somebody who's chasing their career, and rightly so, and really putting all the hours and work and effort into succeeding in whatever path that is. On the other end of the spectrum, there might be a single parent working 60 hours a week to put food on the table for their family. So we're walking around, rushing around a city, and I understand we haven't got all the time to stop for one another and be open for one another in this way all the time. But it was interesting because also London and Londoners and being in this city, my perspective on the whole place started to change, actually, because when I'd go out and I'd sit with somebody and I'd cut hair for them, it almost created this doorway for other people. This person became visible. That was a big part of it, from invisible, sometimes completely isolated, ignored, which is just so not as human beings, how we're supposed to live. So fundamentally against what we're hardwired for and some of our needs. But this door would sort of open up to the rest of the city because people would stop and compliment this person or say, hey, can I buy you some food? Or, just these interactions that started happening with the public whilst I was cutting hair. It really restored my faith too and in the people around me, because I had sometimes had this feeling too where I was like, God, people are so rude here. No one talks to each other, and not everybody, but you're getting on the tube at 5 p.m. rush hour. It's carnage sometimes, people elbowing each other to get in at the last spot. But no, it's just, that's just being part of the mechanism of the city that's happening and being kind of, just those cogs in the machine and everyone's getting on with their day. But give somebody the opportunity. I saw how much compassion there is, how much heart there is for when somebody has that moment or has the opportunity, they'll want to give. And the person, that was, the first person I met, it was also just a big lesson for me as well. Something that I ignored for a long time, or maybe not ignored, but not really placed as much value on, which is my time. You know, the haircut's a great way, and it continues to be to this day, an amazing way to make somebody feel good, feel more dignified. But it's really just time. It's something that we all have. It's something that, or, you know, this is just a reminder what I do of something that we all do on a regular basis when I think when we're connected in that way, to recognize that, if we show up for somebody, especially somebody who might need us right now, it means a lot, you know?
Yeah, it's powerful stuff, right? Because somebody that's kind of like been put aside by choice or by action, you know, however, right? You're stepping right into that space. Not only are you giving them the time, it's a haircut, you know what I mean? You're touching their face. You're right in that space. It's like it's very intimate, a haircut, right? For me, at least. So this is quite the move. It's a huge pattern break. Society's just going along, and we're passing them, and we're pattern-seeking animals. And then you step, and you're like, you open up that portal now for other people to go, oh, I'll break the pattern. Like monkey see, monkey do. One sheep goes. I remember in Nepal years ago, I was resting, and I was watching sheep on the hill, like 30 of them. And they were all just together, like an hour. And then eventually one of them went left. And it was like 2 minutes, and the next one went left. And then they all went left. And they kept repeating this pattern. And we're like this. So a radical shift like this is powerful.
It's such beautiful. You know, the imagery there. You're right, and it's how we're programmed. You know, and we can break the cycle with that. I really believe that. You know, because you know, it's not for me. It's just I really do. I feel that any person. I also have a lot of empathy. Like with the work I do, I never point fingers with even people who judge people in a certain position. We're so much more complicated. We're so much more complex than that. It's just about layers, you know. It's not like even if somebody who's looking at somebody in this position and, you know, junkie, method, drug addict, whatever you want to call that person, you know, or somebody who's just this crazy quote unquote person, you know. If I want to really embody things like empathy, those principles, like it has to be full spectrum. It can't just be like top down for people who are less fortunate than me, or like let's not look at it like higher or lower, but it's got to be this circle, you know. And just because somebody's in that position in their life right now, that's no place to judge them either. They're just the product of their environment, of their conditioning. So, you know, when you start to release this stuff, it becomes all a bit easier. I think it becomes, you know, about just recognizing we're all where we're at right now, but it's important to see beneath those layers. And what you're saying, Otto, I really believe in that. I really believe in, rather than my job for me, like I don't have the time to get into little spats on social media and argue with people from afar. That's not my beat. It's like I really haven't got the energy for that right now in my life. But what I do is by trying to lead by example. You know, I go out and do the work I do, knowing that I might not be able to solve homelessness in the time I'm here on this planet. It's not possible, and I'm not really measuring it like that either. Like how many people can I see off the street within a year? I'm thinking, well, I can go out and live my message, whatever that is. And I can go out and do what feels naturally right to me, to go out and reach out a hand to other people. And that I think has a natural ripple effect. In fact, I've seen it because, you know, Do Something for Nothing is this thing that, it just sort of grew. Other people started to get involved in different ways. Yoga teachers going into volunteer their time in drug rehabilitation centers, young people going in to have lunch with senior citizens who don't have any family to come in and see them, to spend some time with them. You know, there's all these beautiful actions that started to emerge that are already happening. You know, I mean, they're already happening each day. But I think what's important is, it's about putting this stuff in a place where people can see it more. Not to say, hey, look at me, I'm doing this great thing, but just because it does have a natural ripple, and it does, I think, have a knock-on effect, as you said, to other people.
It's clear the impact that it has. Like if anyone goes to your Instagram account, and we'll put that in the show notes, but I went down, scrolled not too far down, and there's one in particular, a gentleman in Mexico City, I think it is, where you're videoing him and you're cutting his hair, and like you can just feel the mask start to crack, and all of a sudden just tears start to come down his face, and all you're doing is giving him a haircut, and having a conversation with him. And maybe I don't know if you speak Spanish, maybe you do.
See,
A little.
So maybe you were having, I was in my head, I was thinking, well, I couldn't carry on that conversation, but just the act of cutting the hair and the touch is enough to make this amazing impact.
Yeah.
And it's clear that it's impactful.
Yeah, and it's, so Sergio, who you're talking about, he's somebody who I go back and see quite often now. I've been here. And actually to talk about that, my Spanish is pretty limited at the moment, but I'm learning. But it's amazing because, sometimes you don't even need that to be there and show up for somebody. Yeah. With that clip I think you're talking about with Sergio, I just had my arm on I was cutting his hair and he just starts to break down, as you said. And I love the way you described that because I think it's so powerful. It's like, the mask starts to crack. I think we all know what that's like, the person we feel like we need to show up to the world, but not who we truly are and how we truly feel sometimes. And that might not be someone like Sergio, who's living on the street, who used to be this very proud man, this security guard who had, all his stuff and now he really hasn't. And so much pride even that he doesn't like to show people that he walks with a stick now. He puts his coat over it, or whether it be somebody who's showing up to work this morning in an office somewhere who's having to be whoever they are in this environment, but there's a hell of a lot of stuff happening for them at home right now. Yeah. But I think it's so important to have environments where we can crack, where we can break down, where we can go, fuck, this is actually really what I'm feeling right now. And these moments are so important to me as well, really, because in even these small interactions I have with Sergio, where I'm pretty much learning a lot of Spanish, actually going out and having these moments with people out here. But I've been in places like India and done this too as well, or all over the world, really, and it's amazing because it just teaches me each time that you can sort of penetrate all this whatever it is from the outside. As I said, the language, the culture, the environment, and what's happening, and you just try and connect with somebody, and it usually always works, and of course people who have been through so much. I see people sometimes who, wow, they can't even look at you in the eye. It reminds me of who I was as a young person. Like I couldn't even look my teachers. I couldn't even give people eye contact. I was such it's a different story, but school was such a difficult experience for me. I got pretty badly bullied in primary school, my last year of primary school before I moved to high school in the UK. We call it so in high school, I really just transformed into this person that needed to be liked, that needed to make sure all these relationships were totally okay. So I was friends with the tough kids. I was friends with the every sort of group and social sector in school. And I wasn't who I was. I spent 4 years completely hidden by just, and I got through beautifully being liked by everyone, but not being who I was. And not only that, but I had real issues with concentration. I wasn't diagnosed with ADHD until later in my life, but authority figures and teachers. I remember I couldn't even look people in the eye when I was having a conversation. And sometimes, referring back, it's a different situation. But I see people who, they've just been through so much, and there's ways now that I feel like I've learned to be with people where, it might not always be smiles and high fives and, this beautiful moment, but trying to get really quiet and recognizing just be with what is in that moment. And I think circling back, it can be amazing because there's different levels of, you see how people open up. But even if somebody stays very closed for that first haircut, sometimes I go back twice, 3 times, and then you start to see gradually you build that trust with somebody, and gradually they start to show this other person underneath who, if you walk past on the street 20 times that month, you wouldn't see, because you've got to sit there and spend that time with them to do that.
It's incredible, isn't it? The power of a simple act like that. I think about, you said it earlier, the ripple effects, which I felt in my life from your simple action. Because the first time we met at that retreat, I'm talking to everybody at the retreat from all over. How did you get here? How did you learn about this? And like, Joshua. I'm like, who's this Joshua Coombes guy? Is he like some famous guitar player? Or like, what the hell? But what I'm saying is that simple act brought those people there. Well, now friends of mine, like family, people I love. And because of that, I know it's like but it's profound. Aside from the haircut and your transformation and all of that, like it's beautiful.
It's just an amazing thing to me as well. Honestly, I'm so grateful because, I started to post about, the retreats you're referring to, that I'm part of a team who helps facilitate these retreats in Mexico, and where we met, obviously, Otto. And it was amazing trying to just put that out there a bit on Instagram and see if that resonated. And there was quite a few people who came through, and it was it's obviously a bit different than like normally the things I post about. And that's what's amazing for me about Instagram. Honestly, has been I've met like dear friends, people who came in from the retreats, but also it's been such a positive place for me over the years, because for me it's an amplifier. The trick is, this is how I see it anyway. It's like when I used to play music. It's not this, like, it's just a way of plugging into, if you have a message to put out there into the world. But I'm not wrapped up with my self-worth or who I am with the likes and comments. And it's a really difficult thing, because when I go into schools and I speak to young people about this stuff, I can see the weight they carry through who they are and this app. But for me, it's a place to talk about something, and wow, people have helped out so much through the years. I wouldn't be where I'm at now doing this, because to sort of go full circle, I haven't been paid for a haircut now for about 7 years. I left my job working in the salon in London after about 6 months. And that was just because I was doing this more and more, and these moments kept me going back. And also it just really blew up, as I said, with more people wanting to get involved. So I left my job and started to work in like cafes and bars for a few months to sort of pay the rent while I was going out and doing this. And then I got an email, I remember, from somebody who followed me on Instagram. It was a guy, a CEO at an ad agency in New York. And he said, "Hey, I follow you on Instagram. I've been seeing what you're doing. I'm just wondering, do you ever give talks about what you do?" Yeah. And at the time, I was like, maybe. I was like, I don't know. I've never got up and spoken in front of anyone about this before. And they're like, we've got a annual summit coming up. It's in Mexico, actually. It's only in like a few weeks' time, but we had a speaker pull out. And he said, we've got a couple of $1,000 budget. I know that's not much. Is that okay? And I was like, what? I was like,
you have what now?
I was like, I would have, so it was amazing because, again, this is somebody who followed me, who saw my work. And 3 weeks later, I start this other journey, which is, okay, it's not that every time, it's different when I'm going to visit a state school or whatever, but I've managed to, since then, gradually sort of start speaking more, doing this in different settings. And it's a beautiful part of this work, but that's all through this app, Instagram. And not only that, people picked me up from airports, had me stay at their house. I've worked with all kinds of different people, amazing humans who are doing things in different cities, similar, with a similar ethos, who've become really good friends now. So, I think for me, it's just something to project and put out there. And I'm grateful for everybody I've met from there.
Gosh. Yeah.
I wanted to ask, and maybe I start with telling a story before I ask the question, but I remember as a kid, I don't know, maybe this started in when I was in 5th grade or something. My dad used to like just stop, instead of giving people money on the street, he would stop and go, "Hey, can we take you to McDonald's? Can we take you to wherever and buy you a meal?" And those were like 10-minute interactions, right? Where take them, buy them, and my dad talking to them. At some point, he found this gentleman under a bridge. And I remember all through high school, every Thanksgiving here in the U.S., every Thanksgiving, my dad would drive down to that bridge, pick this guy up, bring him back, and sometimes he was drunk off his ass, sitting at our family table. Sometimes he was sober, and I always remember he would go back every Thanksgiving, and he would come in there. And I remember thinking, like, does this even make a difference at all? Like, this guy's the same over and over and over again.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But when I hear you talk about this, it's the moment that matters. And so I guess the question for you is, does this matter to these guys? Is it life-changing for them? Or is it really just the moment and that's enough?
That's enough. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. It's a beautiful story to hear, about your father. And I think that for me, that's, when I hear that, okay, of course, that's my beat. I'm on this path, and I hear something like that, and not only is it life changing for that person in that, because the thing is, life changing. Can we really change somebody's life?
Yeah.
If they live from 1 to 70 years old, we're going to have good and bad and everything else in between. So all we have is a moment. All we have is today. Ultimately, of course, we want to, if we can, be there for somebody for a longer period. But it sounds like your dad was doing that. He was doing what he could do, going back, seeing this person, still showing up for them. It wasn't some one-time thing. And even if it is, that's great too. But I think that is life-changing for them in that moment, in that day, to have somebody come and say, you know what, no judgment. Doesn't matter where you're at right now. Doesn't matter who you are. I don't care. I want to open my door to you and have you in our home and have some food. And for you and I don't know if you have siblings, you said, but I'm sure it's that ripples downwards 100%. It's a really important part, I think, of your upbringing, to have a moment like that, to see that the role models of your life, how they interact with a certain person in a situation. And now that could be somebody who's living on the street, but it could also be going to knock on the door of a family who are, who are seeking asylum and have just been maybe hopefully granted their asylum in your country from leaving all kinds of terrible horrors and having to flee their own country. And imagine that family, new country, new place, new culture, feeling so vulnerable, and someone comes and says, hey, we want to invite you around for dinner. Do you want to come around and spend that with us on Friday with our family? It's like, okay, we'll take that moment. Yeah, it's just a day. It's just a few hours. But what that can do for somebody is make them feel welcomed. That is like what could be the potential, that power underneath it, that energy, to make somebody feel like, wow, okay, it could have taken them years to feel like that, because, they could have felt like they weren't, they were new on the street and nobody really says hello to them. And how many years could that go on before somebody might do something like that? And that really changes everything for me. So I'm very relaxed about my relationship with the people that I meet. I have to have a kind of just like very non-attached to the outcome of things. I have to just rock up and say hello and how are you? And sometimes that turns into a haircut. And sometimes that turns into people who I keep in touch with. And even, my friend Levane, she's somebody who I met who over the summer in London when I was back there, we moved her into her new flat. And, she's been through the mill. We haven't got the time to go into her story right now. But all I can tell you is just unbelievable story of like overcoming adversity. And when I first met her, she was sleeping on the night bus or in a doorway in London. She'd come out of a relationship of like a lot of domestic abuse and violence, and she's in her new flat now, and she's like in a much better place. She's like a year or two into her sobriety. So you never know when that's going to turn into something more where you can become close with somebody in that way. But a lot of the time I go out and I meet somebody and it's a haircut, and maybe that's that. It's just that day. Someone has a phone number that goes dead because there's a very transient existence out there. So I just keep it like, it's more important really who I can be. Like, that's what I can focus on. That's what I can control. Doing my work, doing the work to to be better for the people around me. I still get stuck a lot of the time. I still have bad days myself where I'm an idiot, get things wrong, but the more I can kind of work on myself and be better for the people around me, that's really my kind of path now. And then part of that is going out and doing this work and letting that be organic in those moments that kind of happen.
Yeah.
I love that. Because it really, as I think about, okay, like I grew up this way, my dad doing this, I don't do this type of thing. But I realized the part of it is like, I use that as an excuse, like this idea that it's not really going to be transformative. It's not really going to change their life. And do I really have the time to pursue and help this person go from nothing to something great? But that's not the point, is it?
Yeah.
No,
it's more of an excuse to why I'm not doing it.
It's also a bit of a heavy weight to put on yourself as one person. It's like a really terrible thing we do as human beings to go, right, well, I can't do everything. So, and it's like, well, why was that ever even in your possibilities of what? That's a pretty lofty goal to think, I'm going to solve this whole human being's issues. Because even if you had the resources, here's the thing. I mean, this is not disheartening for me. It's just seeing the full picture. It's like you might have, you could go drop $1 million in somebody, give them a new apartment, fix their life completely within the material world and how that looks. But you might end up getting somebody back to a place where, there's still that teenager who hasn't overcome or hasn't begun to have the chance to work on the things that got them into that place in the first place. They, as you said, that mask or that whatever, that kind of that layer around their heart, the things that have happened to them. So you need to support holistically as well. And there's a lot of people doing amazing things to help people in this way, but then it does need a lot more funding. But I think that my point is that, it's like, it's too much to put on yourself to say that you have to go out and fix somebody's whole world or a group of people. But God, it has a huge effect doing what you can do in these moments. And being, I think just being present in that is really the most important part. Because I can go out and I can cut hair for somebody and do my dues and go out and I can be thinking about where I've got to be or what I've got next and, kind of not really being there. But if you really if you actually give somebody your presence, you actually give somebody that moment, it's felt. We all know what it's like. We all know that's like when somebody you're like, oh, you're actually listening to me. You actually care about what I have to say. It's huge. And then, for people listening with businesses or people with more influence who have, maybe perhaps a particular talent or a particular set of skills. Wow, there's so much you can do there. I'm about to go back to give a talk again at a company in the UK, an opticians actually, and I spoke at a seminar back in 2019, and wow, since then we've kept in touch, and they've just done so much, not with just the sight and the optical side, but also audiology. They give free eye tests and ear tests to people living on the street in the UK. They're building these well-being hubs in different parts of the cities because they have lots of stores spread out through the UK. But they've got this really particular skill and they're reaching out to people. And it's amazing to see not only are they providing the service, but they're really collaborating with people to try and speak to people with lived experience, to come in and speak to their staff who are providing this service, to learn. It's really transformed the DNA of and the culture of their company because yes, there's still people sleeping on the street all over the UK, but now they're their staff are so much better educated on all of these things. They feel so much more purpose going into work because they are working for a company who cares, and they get to have these one-on-one interactions with people too. So I think there's always going to be a way of how that looks like for different people. But that's where I think I'm just really proud and for the opportunity of, through the work that I do, coming in and being able to open that door a bit to say, okay, well, here's what I do. But, what can you guys, what's your talent? What's your treasures? What can you do with the time and the skills that you have?
Yeah.
I love that. Honestly, that's part of why I think Otto and I wanted to have you on here is because we have a pretty unique audience, I think, great luxury weddings, people with a ton of success, a ton of creativity. And I just hope that, because it's certainly inspiring for, I think, Otto and I hope that there's somebody out there listening that goes, oh my goodness, I have an idea. I know how, maybe that's just someone who's great at logistics, right? And they have some crazy idea that transforms someone's life.
Yeah,
Crazy
and your
ideas.
own life. That's the other part about this whole process is for free, you get to transform yourself. That's what's coming out of this. When you take acts like this, you change. You
Oh my
get
God.
meaning. You get joy. You get all of the things you're giving just flows back. It's like, it's a powerful thing.
And that's it, and I think it's really important that part of it is so overlooked sometimes, because I think sometimes people can feel, well, of course we don't go out with the reason being, for my personal growth and my development.
Yeah.
But it's like such a natural byproduct of this stuff. You're going out of your comfort zone within the walls and paradigms of your reality and your world, and you're reaching out to another person or group of people, but you got to dig a bit deeper for that stuff. Like anybody can go and don't get me wrong. Like we need money, we need resources. As I said, like if you're somebody who's donating money to a particular cause, like God knows they need it, so that's a great way of being able to help too. But there's something different digging in to say, wow, are we going to sort of that crazy idea you said maybe, James, that someone might have, and like trying to implement that, trying to reach out and do that in a more personal way, like with whoever or whatever group of people you want to help. It's like, you got to get outside your comfort zone, and like any other part of life, that's going to help you grow. That's going to help you grow individually or as a team. Yeah, and it bonds you too as well. There's nothing like, I think, the bonding that can happen when you get real and you go out and you do this kind of work, because it brings you closer, because it strips back all the layers, and showing up for people in this way, however you do it, it's it's a powerful experience for sure.
Yeah, and you don't have to be Joshua, but just for those listening right now, right, like a small idea, just somebody today, just show them that kindness. Pause for a second, look them in the eye, or just like small little things like that, right?
Yeah.
Break those patterns in yourself that discards it and walks by it and goes, no, it's fine. Like, and just little acts, like a workout routine. I always get stuck on those, but it's the same principle.
It's true. No, it's so true. Breaking the pattern. You can't be going and doing the same thing every day. You have to mix it up, and it's the same as life. That little mixing it up bit, it can be really small to begin with. Honestly, like I used to try and just in London for sure as well. Just one example to maybe wrap it up is, it seems really small, but we'd get onto the bus, all those double decker like red buses flying through London. We turn into people who just beep. So basically, once the Oyster cards and these cards or your contactless, you could just beep this pad in front of the driver. And the driver's just looking ahead, pulled up another stop, and nobody's even saying hello to him. And I'd always just try and say, hey, good morning. How's it going? And you'd see sometimes people just wake up from this like, oh, I'm a human too, and you're a human, and you're just acknowledging me. It sounds so damn simple, but it's like, it's those little things, like the cashier, the checkout person, like, of course, like a lot of us do this anyway, but trying to like embody and build in like that sort of presence, awareness as you go about your day. You don't even have to stop for that person on the street or whoever it is to begin with. Just the interactions you have on a daily basis with people. The other thing I'd say, I know I could talk about this stuff all day, it's just, it really changes your reality. Like my reality is completely different based on how I interact with the world around me. And it makes a lot of sense. And it's crazy. I just get, when I'm in a bad mood and I wake up, and I still have those days and I'm just pissed off at people or whatever, or pissed off inside, but it starts getting reflected to the world around me. Those things just start coming in all the time. Somebody, nicks your parking space. Somebody gets in front of you in this thing. You're noticing all those little annoyances, those things. But you go out there with love and your heart open and try and give a little bit of that energy instead. And wow, you start being observant in a completely different way.
Yeah. Now I'm just thinking, Josh, you know where I'm at. Like Dojo's, the cafe, we used to live above it, right? It's just here. And I go there almost every day, and I love the people. I order my Dojo sandwich with bacon and sausage, and I walk out, right? And even now I'm just thinking as I go back, like just shifting that intentionality and just like, hey, how's it going? And then order my sandwich, of course. Yeah.
How are you? Those small things, and we can all start there. I think everybody, wherever you are, those things are like completely achievable. And then where you want to go with that is up to you.
Man, because we teach these principles in the business side, right? We say like, bring value, listen to people, and the end result, maybe the business will succeed. But I'm like, from a life perspective, you can infuse your life with meaning and joy and happiness right now with the same principle, take interest, listen, look at somebody, don't just step up and go, what can you give to me? Think, what can I, and the things, like you said, your world shifts because, anyway, it's wonderful.
I'm with that.
James.
Yeah.
You were saying.
No, it's beautiful, Otto. I love what you're saying. Where can people find you, Joshua?
Yeah,
if they want to learn more.
Yeah, Joshua Coombes on Instagram, and Do Something for Nothing too. The book, as you mentioned before, is a great way to sort of get in a bit further to some of these stories, and it's a really easy read because it's kind of like short stories. There's photos in there as well, but it's a really beautiful way to get to know people all over the world that I've met, and different people who are living on the street at the time, and yeah, so that's a great thing to also pass on to a friend when you finish, because it's a great way to change the narrative around this issue. So yeah, that's the one, and also DoSomethingForNothing.org. That's the website as well. So
yeah, and it's a stunning book. It's visual. He's a really good photographer. It's beautiful. It's a really, for the photographers, don't buy the book. Buy the damn book, man. Come on.
I appreciate it, Otto. And I've started Otto kindly lent me his Leica to be here in Mexico City with, which I've really enjoyed. So thank you. So I'm still learning the craft, but yeah, I love taking photos too.
Yeah, man.
Hey, and is the speaking thing still a thing? You're still speaking? Like, how can people get in touch with you if they want you to come speak for a thing?
Yeah, well, maybe I could give you my email for that to put on the show notes or whatever. I've got that on my Instagram too as well. But yeah, you can just email me. I mean, I don't have a team. It's just me. So it's, the speaking things, no, that's a really important part of it. Because to be honest, that's the only way, sole way that I am able to put fuel on the tank to continue down this road and do this work. So yeah, that's kind of something that, if anybody's interested, I love that. The talks are, a really powerful way to inspire an audience, and and it's very visual, the work that I do, very the transformations are really big, and it's really a nice way to kind of get people connected in the heart and feel this stuff.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Brother, thank you, man. Like, seriously.
Thank you, guys. Honestly, absolute pleasure. Really so happy we had this conversation. Thank you for having me.
It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for having your clippers for that ride back home. We've met because of it. So cheers to you, Josh.
Thank you.